Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Amma ba'du, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to our daily fiqh hour. Um, okay, I've got questions coming already. That's what I was reading. So today's theme is going to be about marriage, as was set out yesterday. So marriage, as I said, is one of those things which everybody at least once, or most people do at least once. It's one of the biggest occasions of a person's life, apart from being born and dying, in which in neither cases we have a choice. The case that we have in marriage is that obviously we have a choice, or relatively speaking, we have a choice. Now, marriage's basis is that it is a contractual arrangement between two people. That's in essence what it is, a contractual arrangement between two people, where two people decide that, you know what, we're going to live together and we're going to try to provide each other support and provide each other the requirements as a couple as we make this journey through life. So, what kind of duties fall on the husband's shoulders? The duties that fall on the husband's shoulders is obviously the purchasing of a house, or at least having a residency, so that the woman can leave her father's house and go to her husband's house. And also food, because up until now she was under her father's kind of responsibility, and now she's moving into her into the into her husband's house. Okay, so therefore, the situation then arises is that once these two responsibilities have been made to each other, then they're supposed to live by them. Now, what happens most of the time, unfortunately, is that people don't really get fully educated before they enter into marriage. So they're not really fully aware of the requirements, what rights each party has over the other, what responsibilities each party has over the other. Usually it happens when they're very young. Parents tend to take the lead. The people get married, and then they obviously try to come to terms with what this married life is about and what their objectives are. Unfortunately, then obviously problems do arise, and there's no means of how to resolve those problems. What is the method that should be used to resolve that problem? What conflict resolution should exist to resolve that problem? And remember, I know you might think, well, why have we got discussing onto problems immediately? When life is going smoothly, then there's not an issue. When two people are working together collectively as a team to have children, to raise children, to have the same objectives with their children, then it's not a problem. It only becomes a problem when there's ikhtilaf. That's always the issue, whether that's in business, whether that's at work, whether that's at home, whether that's between husband and wife, whether between children. It's only when ikhtilaf comes up. Now, what is the method and what should the process be for resolving conflict? What should be the process when issues come up? How should they be resolved? So that's why very early on in the marriage, the husband and wife have to agree to something to say, okay, everything is within our so-called honeymoon period, but what are we going to use as a means for deciding between the two of us when there is an issue that's coming up? So that's the first thing. Secondly, obviously, what needs to happen as well is there's got to be a certain level of maturity that exists between the two parties. And what we mean by what must exist between the two parties is there's got to be a sort of what we call a little bit of give and take. There's got to be transparency. There's got to be honesty. There's got to be fairness. And I think once you start off with those good principles, then even then, every now and then when the education argument does come up, then there's always a way to resolve that particular argument and to find a solution out of the argument. Sometimes we think that, arguments are a problem. I wouldn't necessarily say so. Arguments, as I've described them in the other lectures in marriage, is what I call the cupping of marriage, where, sometimes you need to get the bad blood out of the relationship. Sometimes you need to get a little bit of the steam out of the relationship, and then you can carry on as normal. What you don't want to do, carrying on that same analogy, is to have a hemorrhage, whereby, as a consequence of those continuous arguments, that a person now is literally, the marriage is dying, and then there becomes a problem. Now, many people say, okay, well, if a marriage doesn't work, should you just continue to force it to work? Sometimes, women will get in contact and say that we've been advised by scholars that we should be patient. So the answer which comes to that is that this, look, sister, that choice is completely yours. Okay, if you're in a relationship, if you're in a marriage, and you're not happy in that marriage, or that marriage has got issues with it, whether this because the spouse is acting in an aggressive way with this person, or because the spouse is not fulfilling her rights, then the question which comes up there is that's now your choice. What we can't do, what sisters do as well, or some sisters do, is they say, oh, the scholars have told us to be patient, when in fact they've actually adopted that themselves. Because when you start to discuss that with them, and when you start to have that conversation with them and say, you actually get to the bottom of it, where they've chose to stay like that. They've chose to be in that relationship. So it's not as though they are going completely on the scholar's advice. It's that when they actually strip away all these kind of veils that exist, they get down to the bottom and say, actually, I've made a conscious decision. So one of the first things I do is when I cut to the chase and I say, look, because usually, obviously, very rarely do you get husband sort of complaining. Husband usually tries to find a solution in that marriage. He will either say, okay, is it permissible for me to divorce my wife? Am I doing something wrong? Or the husband won't get in touch at all. Whereas when the woman gets in touch, she's usually from a perspective of she is not necessarily directly blaming her husband, but she's putting the main concern at his door, saying that he is the perpetrator. He is the one that's causing the problem in the marriage, whereas I'm trying to make this marriage work. So at the end of the day, when you do strip away everything and you say to the sister, look, you are making a conscious decision to stay, and she gets that, then obviously the whole conversation changes. So there's got to be some level of maturity. The other thing which I want to add is that there's now this misconception because of movies. People watch movies. So a lot of young people watch movies, and they watch a rom-com or they watch a romantic movie, and they see that, oh, look at this, people fall in love and they're doing this together and they're crying for each other and they're dying for each other and whatever. And then people think that, oh, when I get into a marriage, this is how it's going to be. My husband is going to be like this. My wife is going to be like that. So first of all, obviously, most of these actresses and actors are usually the kind of elite from their own communities. Secondly, they've got a lot of makeup going on. And thirdly, there's a lot of camera and lighting, which makes them look far better than they actually are. So that's the first thing. On top of the fact that obviously they've been selected, handpicked to look to be the attractive ones. So therefore, if you're going to judge your wife looking like a potential actress that you've seen, or a pop star that you've seen, or you're looking at your husband to be some potential actor that you've seen, then you're already starting off on the bad foot, because they're just not going to be like that. Okay, normal people aren't like that. So we're already entering into some kind of, not a real relationship. Then obviously the expectation that there's going to be romance and there's going to be this and there's going to be that, and he's going to sacrifice himself for you, or she's going to sacrifice herself for this Romeo and Juliet. Again, that's absolute. It's in the movies. If that was the case, then why are those very same movie actors in their own personal lives in their second or third or fourth marriage? If it was a real thing, then those very same people that we see on our screens would be in successful marriages, and they're not, which shows it's not a real thing. Okay, it's an illusion. So we have to come to understand that this is an illusion. In reality, in Islam, it's not a necessity that the husband and wife actually love each other. It's not a necessity. What is necessary is that the two are civil enough to work together and produce a family, and then lead that family, those young people, until they become adults, ensuring that they are God-fearing, ensuring that they have some knowledge of Allah. So that's really the essence of a successful marriage. What is not the essence of a successful marriage is what we're being portrayed to us on the screens, that's what a marriage is, because that's make-believe. That is actually a product of fiction, which it clearly says is a product of fiction, and there's no reality to it whatsoever. So therefore, we shouldn't go into marriages with these absolutely unrealistic impressions, unrealistic ideologies. Marriage is obviously going to be hard work. Sometimes you get a lot of men who aren't really wanting to get married, but they know that obviously for the physical side of things, they need to get married, but they don't want the responsibilities. But that's not how it works. Life is not supposed to be just running around from one's responsibilities. In fact, as soon as you reach bulugh and you are, given the hukm of mukallaf, mukallaf coming from the masdar of taklif, then you are burdened. Okay, you are burdened by the Sharia. You are burdened by fasting. You are burdened by praying Salah. This is a burden which is placed upon you. And this is life. One cannot run away from life and sort of give the impression that, oh, I want to live this kind of lifestyle or that kind of lifestyle. Absolutely no. Marriage is something which the Prophet ﷺ made it quite clear that an-nikahu min sunnati, faman raghiba an sunnati falaysa minni. That nikah is from my sunnah. And those people who renegade from my sunnah, then they're not from me. So he encouraged it, he enjoined it. So therefore we have to engage with it. But once we engage with it, we have to engage with it properly, fulfilling all the rights that come with it, all the responsibilities that come with it as well, not just the physical need being met, and that's it. There's so many obviously other conditions associated with it. So that inshallah covers the theme for today. Let's just see if any questions come up relevant to that. Assalamu alaikum. What counts as tight? When I stand, trousers are loose. However, if I sit or pray, the fabric bunches up so it looks tight. Is to make it haram makruh, and it affects the validity of my salah. Tight trousers are exactly how you've just described them, that when you are praying that it actually sticks to your body. That's a tight trouser. Okay, obviously when you are stood up, it's not going to be tight. Why? Because you're not stretching any part of your muscles. It's when you go into sajda that now your posterior is is pushing out. Your thigh. That's where obviously the trouser is now going to catch. So it's supposed to be loose. It could quite easily go into the hukum of haram because the clothing has to be loose fitting so as not to reveal the shape of the body. Quite clearly, it cannot be like that. And that's why, men used to wear long gowns so that even if the trousers were slightly tight, then the long gown, like a jubba or a kameez, would cover that. So there won't be any issue with it. Can you give advice on how to best revise for exams? How does one make the most out of revision and show that is barakah? Well, firstly, you got to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who gives success. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who gives failure. So you have to turn to him first. You have to implore him. You have to seek a favor from him. And the only way you're going to do that is if you are in the good books with him. If you are not in the good books with him, then obviously there's less chance that he's going to place barakah in your exams. There's less chance any of his raham and maghfirah and barakah are going to descend upon you because you're already in his bad books. So first you've got to make sure is that you've got you've got a good relationship with Allah. So that's the first thing. So you got to produce that first. Once you have a good relationship with Allah and you're abiding by his sharia to the best of your ability, the best of your capacity, then you will implore him. You will plead with him. You will request from him. And once you've done that, the next thing you will do is you will try to find techniques which work for you. So for different people, different things work. Some people are people who can just look at things and it can absorb it. Most people don't work like that. So what they would do is they would get their notes. They would then they would get the textbook, for example, and start making notes, highlighting key parts, taking key parts and writing into another notepad. So all this is the fact that you're writing helps you remember it rather. Similarly, you may repeat it back to somebody else. Take breaks, so you're not doing more than say 40 minutes, 45 minutes periods where you're then having a 10-15 minute break. Try to do something physical in that 10-15 minutes so that it's not just a thought. And really, you got to look at what works for you. There's no quick rule. These are just general advice and tips I can give you, but you got to look at what works for each person. Is it okay to do college work in the masjid if you're a Qai, or is it better to do elsewhere? There's nothing wrong in doing it there. If you are in the masjid, it's not a problem, because in the masjid, most likely you're going to then not engage in anything else like answering the phone or whatever. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Salam. I have a friend who has rheumatoid arthritis throughout his body. He says at times he can't wash the hands due to them feeling weak and having a funny sensation when his hands get wet. He also tells me that he does tayammum sometimes. In regards to wudu, what would be the best solution for him, inshallah? And one more question, a type of jinn called ifrit. Could you mention more about him, please? So when it comes to this, if he has this rheumatoid arthritis, then even though washing his hands makes him feel weak and a funny sensation when they get wet, it does not then remove the responsibility of making wudu, because making wudu is compulsory. It's only if it is proven that this is having a detrimental effect on his health, then one can start looking at potential alternatives. But for the fact that it's not having a detrimental effect on his health, but he's finding it uncomfortable, we know, for example, that it is highly regarded if in circumstances where you've got no access to warm water and you still make wudu with cold water, it is highly regarded because of the difficulty that you're facing. Not that you intentionally go into the bathroom and just use a cold tap. Access to warm water, but you don't use that as an excuse not. Therefore, I would not be doing tayammum in his circumstances. I would be making. So that's what he should do. What type of jinn? Ifrit. What I would do is, if you leave that with me, inshallah, I'll get you some information that I have access to see if there's anything. There's not much shared about him. Yani most is going to come by sources which aren't necessarily absolutely certain. But inshallah, I'll make a note of it, and in tomorrow's session, I will discuss it. Let me just see if there's any questions that have come through on the Markaz al-Ifta wal Qada. So, assalamu alaikum. I hope you're well. If you could share some, so rahmatullah, ASA doesn't really mean anything. If you're going to give salam, please give as full, as I mentioned previously many a times. I am well, alhamdulillah, pray the same for you. If you could share some beneficial tips for Sunnah Ihtikaf and how best to utilize one's time. When it comes to the Sunnah Ihtikaf, then obviously you are a guest of Allah, you are in the house of Allah, so you will use that time productively. Now, let's get the sort of factual things out of the way first, the kind of administrative side. Obviously, you're going to eat sometimes in the iftar, in the masjid, in the Ihtikaf for iftar time, and obviously for suhoor time. So that's some time that you need to give to that. You're going to pray Tarawih, and you're going to pray all the salahs bil Jama'ah. So that's another thing you're going to do. And then on top of that, you're going to use that time as well for tilawah Quran. So that's a perfect opportunity to, at least in those 10 days, try to do a khatm al-Quran, 3 juz a day, at least 3 juz a day, but work with the premise that there's only 9 days of Ihtikaf, so that in case the moon is sighted and then you're not short. So instead of doing 30 divided by 10, do 39, so you end up doing more. And also what to do is, once that is done, then you've got, if you have qadha salahs, then complete any outstanding qadha salahs. Similarly, if you've got any opportunity to sit in durus, sit in durus. Try to do your nawafil as well. So you're completing your nafil salah. And also you try to do any ta'lim, anything that you want to sit with some scholars and study. So in essence, mix your time up between physical prayer and recitation and learning, so that your time is occupied. Make a timetable. Maybe the masjid that you're going to do Ihtikaf in will have a timetable for you. But if not, make a timetable so you know that all your sessions, all your times are booked. Apart from the fard ghusl, are we permitted to take a bath on Jummah day when one's body smells of odor if it is a daily habit? No, one is only permitted for fard ghusl, not for anything else. Let's just go across to the ladies group. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear Mufti Amjad, may Allah Azza wa Jal continue to provide you with barakah in all your works that benefit Ummah. Ameen. For Jazakallah khair for such a nice dua. My question is, I'm a supporting sister who has never attended Tarawih before and Witr and dua. I would like to be with her for all of it, but return back for Qiyam and Witr then. Is that permissible? Yeah, absolutely is. That's not a problem for you to do that. Since you're in the masjid, I guess you can pray the fard salah there. And then you could do your own qiyam when you come home and pray your witr then. So there's no issues there. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I would like to ask regarding Eid al-Fitr, who is eligible to receive? I think you mean Zakatul Fitr or Sadaqatul Fitr. Eid al-Fitr is the day of Eid. So I think you've just got your terminology mixed up. So Zakatul Fitr is the same people, the fuqara and the miskin. Fitr can be given to one person, because Zakatul Fitr we have calculated it to be £4. If having no male mahram to pay for the whole family, yes, you may. There's no issue with that. When exactly can you start paying? Normally, sort of the last when you start entering the last 10 days of Ramadan, that's a good time to give it, because it will take some time for you to give it and for the recipient party to receive it. So that's the time to do it, inshallah, because obviously, unless you live in a locality that you can give somebody it directly, then it's not a problem. But otherwise, if you're going to give it to a charity or give it to somebody who's traveling, then obviously you need to take into consideration the time. Assalamu alaikum. If the wife gives zakah and has money to pay Sadaqatul Fitr, is it better that she pays the Sadaqatul Fitr herself, or is it the same reward whether she or husband pays for her? It's better for each individual to practice their own faith. So in that case, it would be better for the woman herself to give it. It's just that it comes under the responsibility of the household leader. But if the woman has, then she can. Can more than one Sadaqatul Fitr be given for the same person? Well, there is only one Zakatul Fitr. It just depends what produce you use, whether you use wheat, whether you use dates, whether you use raisins. Now, obviously, the dates and the raisins are considerably more expensive than wheat is. So even though we've calculated wheat to be around £4 for the Zakatul Fitr, the raisins and the dates are considerably more than that. Okay, they go into the tens of the pounds. So therefore, if a person wants to give more, absolutely you can give more. We only use wheat so that people know what the minimum figure is. Assalamu alaikum. Can you please explain what the following means? That's the hadith I read to you. An-nikahu min sunnati. Faman raghiba an sunnati falaysa minni. That marriage is from my sunnah, and whoever does not follow my sunnah has nothing to do with me. Meaning those people who abandon marriage, okay, out of choice. Those people who abandon marriage out of choice. Not those people who, for whatever reason, can't get married, but those people who abandon marriage out of choice. Either because they're saying that they need to be pious, and by fulfilling their desire of their flesh, then they're not pious enough. That's one example. Or they feel that there are other means that they can fulfill their physical satisfaction without marriage. So in either case, they're thinking that they can achieve the same goal. Either they choose not to achieve that goal and feel it is beneath them, or they try to achieve that goal through other means. Either way is impermissible, because they're not adopting the sunnah. And the Prophet ﷺ has given us a sunnah. He has given us a method. First, he said that one cannot be a monk or a nun. Okay, it is not more religious if you become a monk. It is not more religious if you become a nun and shun the world and shun physical relationships. This is wrong, and this is impermissible. A person has to marry. And secondly, a person cannot take cohabiting as a relationship. A person cannot take the same gender relationship. A person cannot take other means by which they satisfy their desires and feel that that's acceptable. So that's the rationale for that narration, and that's what that means. So we'll wait a few minutes, inshallah, for more questions to come. Whilst we're waiting for those questions to come, then an interesting one. This was raised a couple of weeks ago, and I had added it to the bottom of my list, which is about free speech. Does that concept, is that a concept within Islam, free speech? Can a person say anything and everything? Are there limits to it within the Sharia? Or literally, you are free to say what you want, how you want, when you want, and people should just accept that because we're a community that should be able to air our views. So, inshallah, for tomorrow, our theme will be about free speech. Okay, now that might be our last theme before I travel down to London. The reason why I say that is because on Saturday, inshallah, I won't be in the Fiqh hour because I've accepted a dawat. I normally don't accept dawats in iftar time because one is you get a chance to spend time with family, and secondly, it then affects all my routine. But this is family that's invited me, so I will be with family whilst that's happening. So inshallah on Saturday, I won't be here for the Fiqh hour. And then on Sunday, I won't be here for the Fiqh hour because I will be driving down to London. So we'll be back on Monday, inshallah. So tomorrow I will give you the new time for the Fiqh hour. But as I mentioned previously to you, if you are on our channels, if you are on the YouTube, then you will get notifications, inshallah. So that will be tomorrow's session, all being well. And I can also mention Ifrit as well in tomorrow's session. So before we disappear, any lastminute.com questions? Okay, seems everybody is satiated and satisfied. So inshallah, join us tomorrow, 7:45, which will be our last session before we rejoin you, inshallah, in Ihtikaf with a new background, new everything. Now, as I said, my aim is that I will be carrying on during my Ihtikaf, but I can't promise you because my timetable will be a little bit more challenging, but I will try my best, inshallah. And it will be solely then when I do go for Ihtikaf just on YouTube, inshallah. Okay? Till then, وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.